Welcome to the Thousand Stories podcast. Thank you all for joining me today. It's really an honor to be here around such public servants. We have joining us today Chief Wade Gorley of the Oklahoma City Police Department and Captain Paul Fredrickson, also of the Oklahoma City Police Department. The conversation today will center around some pretty innovative practices that are happening as a joint collaboration between a number of parties. One is OKCPD, the other is the Oklahoma Department of Human Services, and as well as some mental health partners, specifically North Care in Oklahoma City and some others, and really around the idea of bringing resources to the community that are much more difficult to access today than they should be, or maybe in prior days than they should be. Today, there is some pretty incredible collaboration happening. And it's funny, we were in a tour at the Spring Lake campus here in Oklahoma City, and we were touring a legislator. And as we were talking about this program called the Trust Program, and we will dig into that, he looked at me, this legislator, and said, "You all need to talk about this more." And so that's why we're here. We're here to talk about it, to share the story of what's happening, and I'm honored to do that next to both of you. In 2019, Chief, you and I sat down here at the Department of Human Services for the first time we had ever met. It was just after me coming to the agency and really just after you starting as police chief. And we started talking about the tools that law enforcement officers have when they walk into a situation that isn't one where law enforcement is necessary. And I perceived a sense of that you were sharing of sometimes helplessness of the officers, that they would come in and run into a situation of poverty or a situation where there was a mental health, something that was happening, and they didn't have the tools they needed to resolve the issue for the person. Can you tell us a little bit about that conversation? Tell us about what it was, and really in most cases still is like today in the field for somebody in your line of work who runs into somebody with a need that is not a law enforcement need.
Sure, and you mentioned it at the start about, public service. It's what we're dedicated to. It's what we want to do. And so walking away from a situation feeling like you've done nothing to help someone is just not in our DNA. We don't like to do that. And I remember as a patrol officer very early on, I might be called to a home for, say, a burglary report or, any type of police-related matter, something that those folks just needed the police for. And I would get into their home and realize that there was much more needs there. Like I might take a report, but I might realize in that process there was no food in the home, or there was no beds for people to sleep on, or maybe the power wasn't on. And, you wanted to do something to help. And I, like many of our officers today, would do things like go out and buy the family groceries or, something like that might solve the problem for a day or two, but really not fix it. And I remember thinking too, as a police officer, that I would tell people, you need to contact DHS, Department of Human Services, and get on, with them to get benefits started. But I didn't realize how complicated a process that could be sometimes for someone to navigate, especially if they didn't have a computer or other resources to get on and do that. And so that feeling of helplessness, once I became chief and I realized there was a much broader group out there, that we could work together with to help provide those services, I thought, how do we connect those two? And when you and I sat down, it was a perfect opportunity to do that. And it's really strange how that works as well, because not long after you and I met, I went to a major cities chiefs meeting, and there was an agency there that presented about a way that they had helped conquer this problem. And that agency had hired, I believe it was 2 social workers that worked within their police department. And I started thinking after you and I met, I could go hire 2 social workers, but how's that going to help 631 square miles, a population of, around 700,000 people? 2 social workers can't keep up with that. And so that kind of started that discussion of how do we, as police officers, when we're out and we find these issues where people need help, how do we connect them with your folks and do that? And so it was a great partnership that that really helped solve a major need that we had. And we see daily, your folks don't go out probably unless they get called to something, and we're seeing this stuff daily just through interactions that we have. So it was a big opportunity to help a lot of folks in need.
Yeah, and what I loved about the partnership and continue to love about it is it helps for us to sort of solve one of the bigger philosophical sort of stakes in the ground that we've laid or we've planted, is that we want to remove systemic barriers that keep our customers from being successful in accessing services. And so we in our agency have moved so hard away, trying to move away from these big legacy buildings, I call them dinosaur buildings, that we've been sort of handcuffed to. No pun intended. I'm here with the police department, and I'm sure, there's handcuffs on your hip, but no pun intended. But we've been handcuffed to these buildings, and we have not been as deep into the community as we really should be. And so our intent is to leave those buildings and to embed ourselves in the community. And I wasn't intended to share this, but it was interesting as we started sharing this concept internally around embedded workforce at DHS, meaning out in the community with a partner somewhere. We did a survey in Oklahoma County, and we have roughly 900 employees in Oklahoma County that could be eligible for this embedded worker program. And we sent out a survey, and it had two questions. The first one was, here's the description of what an embedded worker is. Are you interested? And we had 600 people of the 900 raise their hand and say, yes, they were interested in being embedded. And actually, you may not remember this, but I remember telling you this next statistic. I remember where we were. I said, so the second question was, if yes, do you have somewhere that you're interested in being embedded? I was thinking food pantry and, like people are volunteer places at a church or whatever. And 53 out of the 600 said, I want to be embedded at a law enforcement partner's location. And I thought, man, I knew we had some committed public servants here at the Department of Human Services, but it's a different level when you are in that situation. In my opinion, it's just another level of public service that yes, I want to provide food benefits to somebody, but I also want to get my hands dirty. I want to be where they are and where they need me most. And so I was honored by that, to be honest. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about what the program is. So I have it written down here, in August of 2020. So, okay, let's maybe back up even before that. So we met in 2019. Then in February, March of 2020, something changed. The world changed. We had been sort of talking about how to do this the right way, taking it a little slow. The world changed in early 2020 with this pandemic, and I think that slowed us a little bit, but at the same time, it allowed for a level of disruption in our systems, mine being one of them, where we could actually really thinking about doing this not in small, sort of test cases, but in broader context, we could scale it. And then something else happened as well in the social justice space. We had the death of George Floyd. We had, just lots of other situations. And the call nationally was around this sort of relationship, this sort of intervention for our communities. And it was so encouraging because we had already started talking about and really working on doing this. I would love your thoughts on around that time, having already had some of the background around that we'd been talking about it, and you started seeing the social justice movements happening. Did you see this as a solution potentially for some of the issues?
Yeah, it's interesting. I do remember that conversation, and when you told me that, and I know originally the way that we envisioned this is we would provide office space in our building to put workers in, and, and they could go out and work together. And so if anything, I think one of the benefits of what COVID did for us is it taught us that conventional way of thinking wasn't going to work. And so I think what we ended up with was better and expanded more because we didn't just have folks in our buildings. I mean, they were out there and getting these referrals and getting out there on scene a lot quicker. And I do think during all of that, it was kind of strange to me that when I really sat down and listened to what those folks in that social justice spectrum were talking about, we were really speaking the same language. I mean, it was funny that oftentimes when I would sit down and meet with folks that were, had something that they wanted to bring up in this realm that we were already working on, is that they weren't saying things that I was disagreeing with. And so when we really sat down and listened to each other, and I found that we weren't, as a police department, we're not doing a good job at getting the message out. And I think we still struggle with that. We've gotten better, but getting the message out that, hey, we don't want to be involved in these situations either. These aren't law enforcement situations. Sometimes we stumble into them, but we have to figure out a way to hand that off to the professionals that can do those things and allow us to back away. And in the past, those resources haven't been there. And if anything, what positive came out of that is, for years, the police department has been the only 24/7 service provider out there for anything. And so for every little thing that's come up in society, when they look around and there's nobody stepping up to take care of it, they go, well, let's give it to the police. They're there. They'll respond any time of day, 7 days a week, holidays, weekends, all of those things. And so what's been nice in that is everybody kind of realizes in society now that they've done that. They realize that that's not working, and that's not what law enforcement was ever designed to do or to be. So it's helped in that space, I think, draw more attention to where funding has been put in those areas that are important, instead of focusing on defunding police and taking money away from the police. I think it's very interesting, even for me as a leader of a police department, I came up through the ranks, but I never fully understood budgeting until I became the chief, because that's the first time it was really a part of my job. And what you don't realize is when you start cutting money away from a police department, it doesn't cut what people think, like cars and, equipment and things like that. It cuts people, because that's 80 to 90, it's really closer to 90% of what our budget is people. So if we start pulling that, because we're not properly funding other sources to get people help, and we start taking funds away from the police, you're just taking away police officers, and we're going to be less able to respond to the things that we need to. So if anything, I think all of this, I think the timing of our conversation was just very appropriate in what happened following, because we were already lined up to do the things that people wanted us to be doing.
Mm-hmm. So I'm glad you brought up the term defund police, because I wasn't going to do that. No, I actually was. We talked about it. But what I was really sort of, I guess, excited about was that we had already built the relationship ahead of time. And it aligned, the concept of getting social services to the community aligned with this philosophy that we had already built around removing systemic barriers and embedding ourselves in the community. So it was an opportunity for us as an agency to stand beside you and to start to deploy our own resources in a mission that we already had beforehand. And so I was really thankful for that. So, okay, now it's time to talk about what we're actually doing. We've talked about the philosophy behind it and what happened. So, Captain Fredrickson, you have been really involved in the trust program, and we currently have, I think, 4 precincts. Or is that what they're called? Precincts? Patrol divisions. Yeah. And the idea, just in a nutshell, is we have provided social workers, and then there are also mental health professionals who sort of stand alongside officers in the community. So when they are deployed to a situation in which a firearm is not required, they have the resources necessary where they don't have to walk away or go buy groceries or something and leave and have this feeling of helplessness, that they can actually call the right person and make a referral and there's a feedback loop, and they know what's happening. So you want to give us some more depth to the program and tell us, about the impact?
Oh yeah, sure. I took the reins of this program from Beto Balderrama. This program was brought to Spring Lake because we know that there are lots of opportunities in all of our patrol divisions for this to help, but it's a pilot program, so it's got to start small somewhere, and Beto was just the right guy for that. And when he got promoted to major, I stepped in and took over, and it's just a great program. I do want to tout your embedded workers quite a bit. They really have created real relationships with our police officers. So the way this works is, police officers, we have a unique opportunity to encounter people who are in crisis. We respond to calls oftentimes that do not require a law enforcement response. And when we find people in need, and those needs they can be anything. They can be resources that DHS can provide. They can be mental health resources that police officers aren't equipped to provide right then. We'll take the information from this person and share it with your embedded workers. And then I always say DHS does the heavy lifting here. They log those referrals. They take them on as a client base, and then they work them. One of the most important things that's happened to me, in my opinion, is we go to a weekly meeting on a Wednesday morning where these referrals are discussed. And I get to attend this meeting because I'm the law enforcement authority, and I provide authority to the program, and I have contact with the officers, so if there's a need to get back to the officer. But what I get to do is I get to hear how these workers collaborate together to provide help to people. So I get to hear every story of the need, and I get to hear the difficulties in providing resources to people, and I get to hear mental health advocates working with resource advocates, and I get to mesh all of that together with our law enforcement response. So it creates a clear picture to me of how good this program is helping people. There's so many stories. We've made 326 referrals. So if you think about since August of 2020, 326 times a police officer has come to a circumstance where they recognize there's a need in this home. And it doesn't have to be a married couple with kids. It's been single community members too that need mental health services. For example, officers went to a woman's house. Her neighbors were complaining because of the rodents. And this woman did not need police service. She never would have called the police. Nobody ever would have known about her. But what we found out is that she, in COVID, had a great anxiety about contact with people, but she also had a debilitating back injury. So she was having her groceries delivered to the door, and this kept her out of the grocery store because of her fear of COVID. However, because of her back injury, she couldn't bring these boxes into the house. So the house was in disarray. She had pets. She obviously was having a mobility issue, a problem. And I went there. I got called there by our embedded workers because they wanted me to help them with these boxes. And it was just as bad as you can imagine. And in fact, the rodents were so bad that while I was there, a hawk came and took a rodent from this pile of food and boxes that was on this woman's porch. So the referral became a mental health referral as much as a resources referral. She just needed some home health care. She needed to get rehabbed from her injury, and she needed to get just some help, somebody to help her get these boxes off the porch. The embedded workers have made real relationships with our officers. I know that they share text messages, they have phone numbers. When an officer is having a hard time with a client and they want some immediate advice, then they can text the embedded workers. So it really is a great relationship.
What I love about that is oftentimes in the spaces that I'm in, we talk about this concept of no wrong front door to services. And this is a true illustration of that. I mean, I don't know that. Well, I mean, certainly lots of people do consider Oklahoma City Police Department as a resource, but lots of people also consider the police department as law enforcement. But now the overall relationship that has been built between law enforcement and the Oklahoma City Police Department, between DHS and the mental health providers, represents a full service front door for people. So this lady who is experiencing poverty and mental health issues, Now it doesn't matter how she engaged. She engaged with you first, then us. And if it was us first, it was us first, then you. And so just a true wide open front door.
Were it not for the collaboration, the officers on the scene would not have known how to get her the help that they would have had. And they probably would have come out of their own pocket to help her, or made a working party for a weekend to come and help clean up her porch. I've seen these sort of service. Police officers have been coming out of their pocket for generations to serve people in the community. And this gives a clear directive, a real tangible way for an officer to help somebody as soon as they see a need.
And it's also systemic, right? So the resources being provided are not just the food box one time or the cleanup one time. By making the referral to other agencies, these are long-term solutions for people, right? So SNAP benefits don't stop in 1 month.
Right.
It's as long as you're eligible, and mental health interventions need to happen more than just once. And so that's what happens through this program is we're solving for systemic needs instead of just instant needs.
Right.
So it's wonderful. So can you tell us a little bit, or give us some context as to what some of the needs are that are, you've mentioned a couple, but what are all of the resources that have been provided in those 326 referrals that have occurred?
Every case is a little different.
Yep.
We have, I've heard great stories of people getting brought back onto their feet. Some of the resources that are provided are food assistance, and we do differentiate between it being emergency assistance and non. So if it's emergency assistance, we have resources the officers know about. They go and they get free food, say from a food bank, instead of having to come out of their pocket. Utility assistance is offered, child care, transportation, health care that's non-mental health, mental health care, child or adolescent behavior problems, substance abuse assessment or services, employment assistance, legal assistance and advice, rental assistance, or someone at risk of being evicted can be served, and then also home repairs. And every one of these has been offered and accepted by clients as part of these referrals.
Wow, that's great. So I noticed from our list that we've got 4 of the patrol divisions. The most recent one opened up at Hefner in June of 2021. Yeah. That's 4. How many? I don't know. How many do you have in total?
We have 4 patrol divisions and Bricktown.
Oh, okay, great.
Bricktown's a subdivision of our uniform support division, and then the youth enrichment services. We started in one division, and we didn't want to overload the program. I really wouldn't want to harm the program by overloading it. So we started with Spring Lake, and in the first 6 months of 2021, we expanded it to all 4 patrol divisions, and it was going well. And Youth Enrichment Services really makes a lot of contact with families in need. In fact, that's their whole mission, is to get children back into school. Kids, it used to be called truancy, but that had a negative connotation, and providing this assistance shouldn't really be a criminal matter so much. So our Youth Enrichment Services team has reduced truancy by aiming for the underlying problems that keep kids out of school. It really is wrapped up in poverty. In fact, the number one thing I've heard from them is lice treatment. Lice kits are considered a hygiene item and not provided in a lot of other ways that people in poverty can get them. But the Youth Enrichment Services team, having community partners donate funds or the kits themselves, have been able to get kids back into school where they otherwise wouldn't have been able to get back on track.
That's wonderful. So you mentioned school, so that brought up something to me that is outside of this program, but I think it's a program that's important to highlight because it also engages with some of the work that we do in a different space. But the Handle with Care program in schools, I think, is a really impactful program. And so I'd love for you guys, again, it's off topic here, so we'll come back to the trust program topic, but this is another great one that I don't know that gets talked about that much. And so I would love to elevate this as well. So does either one of you want to field providing some more context around Handle with Care?
I'll provide some background. with it, and then of course Captain Frederickson can jump in and anything he's dealt with it as. But it started with Oklahoma City Public Schools reaching out to us and telling us about this idea that they had heard from another. I think it was a deal where they had attended a conference or read something about it. And what it was designed to do is, again, as police officers, we deal with a lot of trauma. We go into homes where it's domestic violence or other things where maybe it could be something even as simple, even though it's a fire department issue, the police are usually there to help, especially if someone's been affected by a house fire, and those kind of things. So just something that, we'll run across during our shift where a child who is going to attend school or is going to be in school the next day experience some type of trauma. Oftentimes those kids go to school, and what the school system would tell us is they had no idea what they had dealt with the night before, but there may be behavior issues, or there could be they're just falling asleep in class, they're getting behind on their work. And so it was an opportunity for us to communicate with the school system and let them know when we encountered someone that a child that was of school age that had experienced some kind of trauma. And what was interesting about that, when we talked about it, I explained to him that Oklahoma City is unique in that we have multiple school districts within our city limits that our officers will respond to. And they were very helpful and agreed to, because I told them too, for police officers, we have so many things we have to do. It has to be simple. So we needed one way to notify someone that could, of this child's name. And that's all we say, is that we don't say anything about the particulars. It's just, this child needs to be handled with care at the next day that they're in school. And that's it. And so we don't have to go into any details and violate any confidence or anything like that. And if it's not an Oklahoma City public schools kid, they'll help find where that child does go to school to allow counselors and things to be prepared for that for the next day. So that's kind of the history behind that. I was really surprised at how oftentimes things like that, when you're dealing with bureaucracy and government entities, it can be really complicated and hard to do, but it was amazing. Our IT folks, working with the school's IT folks, we created an email address. It's very simple. The officers, we have a link that the officers can get to in their patrol car. They click on that link, send that message, and that's it. That's all we have to do. And we know that child is getting some help the next day while they're at school, and it's not treated like a discipline problem or, they're not doing what they're supposed to do in school. They know there's something going on here that we need to help this child through. And it allows those counselors to reach out to these other service providers and get that child what they need. So it's a really neat program that it's really taken off.
Absolutely. So thanks for letting me take that detour. I've heard about that program for a while now, and I thought it should be elevated here on the podcast. So we've told two of the wonderful 1,000 stories today. We're in 4 of the patrol divisions. We're at the YES program. And this is, really with both social workers and mental health professionals alongside of law enforcement officers. The future of this program is actually really interesting as well. Today, the way that it works, and you may give some more context here, but it's a very manual referral process, sort of to what you mentioned a few minutes ago around the Handle with Care. It's really easy and it's digital, and that's the referral. Right. Today it's manual. So let's talk about maybe just a minute on how it works today, the referral process, and then I think we can go into some enhancements that are coming.
We've just created a pony Word document that's got enough prompts in it for an officer to apply enough information to this form and email it to your embedded workers. And there's back and forth. We've developed the form over time. We had to, one thing that we added was limited English proficiency. And that way your workers knew that when they called this phone number, they needed to have some other options for communicating with this person. So we pony this Word document, fill it out, and email it to the workers, and then the workers add it to a spreadsheet. So it's just a simple Excel spreadsheet. It's reaching 500 lines here, so it's getting a little complicated, a little burdensome to work with. But once the worker accepts that client referral, it goes to the spreadsheet, and it also gets emailed to me. One thing that was important about me getting every referral is, if we're going to take on this responsibility of uniting social services and mental health and law enforcement, then I felt a responsibility to make sure that none of those fell through the cracks. So emailing or copying me in this email where the referral is attached, I do get to keep that, account for it, and make sure that that case is discussed on the Wednesday morning collaborative meeting. That meeting is done by Zoom too, which is another efficiency we learned from COVID. The referrals get discussed, and then as a team, and this is what I love about the collaborative efforts, I always tell them it's too soon to quit. So if they're having a hard time contacting somebody, or they've got a tough case and they don't know exactly which path to take for providing resources to the person, then as a group, in this collaborative group, this meeting, it happens every Wednesday morning, the different facets of service work together and provide ideas and follow-up. I just think it creates a really good opportunity for this person to be served in the best way with so many different minds on it. And then once we have felt like we've ready to close out a client, we'll close it out. We'll call it green and call that a success. It's an Excel spreadsheet, so I just shade it in green and then move on to the next one. So it's a little complicated and manual, but it's working. It's a good way to track it.
As a statewide organization that we run, our intent when we jump into projects like this is to build it to scale so we can scale statewide. And there are, of course, lots of law enforcement partners that don't have the resources to be able to run a manual process. So our intent and what we've been working on is to build a technology that allows for this to be much more streamlined and for us to gather data and collect data on the topic, to really make sure that the follow-up was made, to continue to make referrals to other outside organizations through the technology. So I want to appreciate you for being on the committee that's been building this platform. And here in the coming couple of weeks, we are excited to launch the internal or the referral form and full workflow behind it around all of the processing of all of this of all of these referrals on the Be a Neighbor platform. So
absolutely, and I commend your staff too. We had some pretty specific asks from the police side. It's just like the chief was saying, it's got to be simple for cops. We have a lot of moving parts, a lot of things we've got to be focusing on, and it's got to be simple. And they came through in high order. There's no external logon needed for us. We're going to be able to access this in a simple way, and all those technical parts are moving together very good. So
great. And what's been powerful for us also is in the Be a Neighbor platform, there wasn't a way for outside referrals to be made. So we got to learn in working with our partners in Oklahoma City Police Department as to how to build this the right way for this specific application, but it will apply to every partner we have going forward. Sure. So we launched with our law enforcement partners, but it informed the next development, which is an outside referral form, which will allow for the community to stand up and serve themselves, churches and nonprofits, to make referrals in a similar way as our law enforcement officers. So that's pretty exciting as well.
That's exciting technology.
Absolutely. Although we'll never take the place of real case management and real in-person engagement. I always have to say that because I talk about technology a lot. It sometimes comes across that I think technology is the only solution, when really technology is just a way to enable people to move from one side of a transaction into true social work, casework, for our organization and others too. So excellent. So that's the future of the trust program. We also intend, of course, if we've built the technology now, is to go to other partners across the state, other law enforcement organizations. So we're excited about that. I've said not yet to lots of them because I want to build the technology. I want to make sure it's something that we can streamline the process. So thanks for letting us, thank you for being our guinea pigs in that. So,
Happily.
so that's the future there. What's the future for the Oklahoma City Police Department? What is the sort of the next great thing or the next sort of exciting opportunity that you all have to continue to in your 100 or so years of service to our community?
So I think this is a definite building block or stepping stone, if you will, to a lot of what has been discussed. And I think most of the public is aware that the police department, the city hired a consulting group to come in and look at our practices and make sure that we're doing things at the best possible way we could. There's also a community policing group that was put together as part of a resolution from Councilman Cooper. And that group, one of the things that became a big focus of them that 21CP picked up on is this joint response to issues with mental health. And so I believe this is right in line with that. And it's just figuring out a way to get more of those resources out where they need to be, especially when it comes to targeting homeless. There's a lot of times too where someone calls in and say it's a mental health issue that's not violent. It's just someone who may be off their medication or is just having a crisis in that moment. Doesn't really require a police response. And looking at that and how we leverage what we've already have going with trust to maybe use that as a way to get folks on scene who are mental health providers and let them handle the situation. And recent state law, of course, everything's not going to take effect, I believe, until July of 2022. But there's some really positive things that are coming out of the legislature in regards to transports, responses to mental health, things that we've been restricted by for many years that the statutes were very clear that only law enforcement could do. And so everybody's realizing now that that's not the best approach. And so I feel like what we've done and will continue to do, this is only going to grow. This is only going to get better. I feel like is laying a strong foundation for moving forward to where, when 21CP issues their report, I have a very strong feeling that it's going to be, keep doing what you're doing and moving it in this direction. And I kind of feel like that's where our future is. And one thing too that I really wanted to make sure we talked about here is I'm not sure we all as police, and then probably you and I, even when we sat down to talk about this, understood the impact this would have on our organizations within the community. And for police especially, we have always had difficulty, especially in certain parts of the community, developing that trust. And ultimately, our goal is public safety, solving crime, reducing crime. And if you don't have that trust and people aren't willing to call and confide in you, you're not going to be able to do that. And I think now, especially, you look at 326 times we've been out for something unrelated to whatever the issue is, or maybe related to that fact. And what people have seen is, the police came out here, they didn't arrest us. They didn't put us in jail for not having electricity. They got us help, They didn't, proceed in a manner that we normally expect the police to do. They looked at this and said, I know somebody that can help you. We're going to get something done about this. And I think, too, one of the obstacles that we had to overcome, which I think has helped your organization, too, is we had to fight the stigma a little bit. And I had to meet with some leaders in the community that were critical of what was going on, because the first thought they had is, well, if you get DHS involved, they're going to take our kids away. And so I think seeing now that these are not criminal issues, these are not people being bad people, they're just in bad circumstances, and we can help them. And I think it's had a huge impact on our relationship in the community, on your agencies, how the community feels about them and that relationship. And I think moving forward, that's the positive in this, is oftentimes people don't seek help because they're afraid, they'll get in trouble. And it's one of the things Captain Fredrickson mentioned was talking about the language barrier. That's an area that we struggle with more than anything. It's not the language. We can communicate, but a lot of our Hispanic population within our community is afraid that if they call on government resources, they're going to get deported or something bad is going to happen as a result of that. And so we work very hard to show them that that's not what we do. That's not our agency's responsibility. And I think a program like this, I'm telling you, when you help a family, word gets out about that, and it really helps in the community. So going forward, I see nothing but positive, and my hope is that we're not sitting back and looking at this like, hey, we're done, we've accomplished something, but we got to make this better and we got to do more.
Absolutely. Great point. Thank you for bringing up the conversation around organizational stigma. Of course, the police department deals with it. We as DHS deal with it very regularly. And breaking down this sort of public narrative that validating this a new narrative that poverty is not a crime. It is something for us to work together to address is critical for all of us. So thank you for bringing that up. So we've talked about the program. We've talked about what's next for the police department. You all have some other things to share. I would love to know how people engage with the police department. You're on a hiring spree right now. So maybe talk a little bit about building resources to serve our communities and how people can engage with the police department.
Go ahead.
Well, first off, we are no different than any other organization around the country right now. It's hard to hire people, and the thing is, everybody's hiring, so you're in competition with others. And so what we've done at the Oklahoma City Police Department is we've created a lot of our recruiting material around not just what a great job it is to be a police officer and how you get to serve your community and be a part of something bigger than yourself, but we've also really focused on how great it is to live in Oklahoma, how great it is to have the community support that we have, the working relationship with other agencies, things like what we're doing here. Believe it or not, it sounds crazy to even say, but when I travel around the country, oftentimes you see where departments don't work together. Different agencies don't work together, and we just don't have that here. So we're really focusing on that. We're focusing on the fact that our community and our city supports us very well, and they fully funded our police department. It's the first time that I can remember in a long time that we have no frozen positions. I'm authorized for 1,235 sworn positions, and this is the first time that if we could hire people and fill all those, we would. And so we're really working hard to do that. We have a lateral academy, which means if you're working with another agency, but you're looking at Oklahoma as a great place to live, we welcome those folks to come, and they go through a shortened academy. They don't have to go through a long academy process, or if they're working somewhere else in the state and want to move more towards a metro area, we're now welcoming those folks and not making them go through that long process to be a police officer that it takes to go through our regular academy right now. So we're doing everything we can to try and get good quality people, and I feel like today society's view of law enforcement from those that are getting into it, it's really changed. It's not somebody that just wants to go out and put bad guys in jail. That's a big part of it, and we do that. But it's also people that just want to serve and want to do things like stop and help somebody change a tire or get them gas, or things like we're talking about, be able to go into a situation that whatever may be going on in that home and just make it better. And I think that's the type of people that we're recruiting. And our website is joinokcpd.com. They can go to that, and I can assure you our recruiters are energetic. They're excited, and if you're interested and you have questions, they will call you back and or meet with you personally and answer any questions that you have.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Guys, I wanted to, we're wrapping up, but I really wanted to just say thank you for you all sitting here represent more than 1,000 dedicated public servants. And I just wanted to say thank you for your service to our communities. Thank you for your friendship and partnership in this work. We've served 326 people together. I think we should shoot to put a 0 on the side of that. So 3,260 is our next goal.
Undoubtedly.
And so I'm excited about that.
Sure.
And just extend our appreciation for you all and your force for the service that you provide in our community. So with that, thanks also for joining today in the 1,000 Stories podcast. Looking forward to the next time we're together.
All right. Thank you as well for all that you've done in your partnership. We definitely couldn't do any of this without you and your agency, and so we appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.